Anahata Ananda, welcome to the Biohacking Secrets Show.
It is a pleasure for sure to connect and to be on the show. We have a lot in common as far as common values and lifestyle vision. So I appreciate you having me on the show for sure.
Beautiful. When someone asks you what you do for a living, what do you say?
That is a quandary, I think. I help people going through core life shifts, do core healing, reclaim their power, and awaken their heart spiritually and create a life that they love. So a lot of times people are going through big life changes. Either they're having a breakup, a health challenge, or they're having a wake up and they're expanding, or they're wanting to accelerate their impact in life. And so I tend to meet people on the full spectrum of life shifts, which is a blast because I love helping people awaken and really manifest what they want in life.
Lovely. And maybe you could share with us a little bit of your origin story and how you got into this.
You know, I think it was my own dark night of the soul, Anthony. Like my whole life was having a full meltdown. I got to the point in life where I checked all the boxes and, big house, money, marriage, 2 kids, and it wasn't really a life that was soulful to me, besides my kids, of course. And I think that going through what I call my marital liberation, also known as divorce, really shook up every area of my life. And it got me to look at everything, even though I didn't want to look at everything. It forced me really to look at everything and decide what are my real values and to create, to rebuild my life in alignment with those, because I wasn't really living in alignment with my soul. I had checked all the boxes, and that led me down a path of, not fulfilled and addictions and, really a lot of challenges in my health, in my marriage, in my like inner peace. And so it catalyzed me into, because after I was going through that, I just was propelled into personal development. And I started with, shamanism because I wanted to get the deep emotional stuff out. And, therapy was just absolutely not cutting it at all. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I need to go deep. And so, the shamanic practices of deep emotional clearing and soul retrieval and shamanic breathwork started excavating the density and the wounds, the anger, the emotional distortion. And I was so grateful to have that as a tool that was actually getting at the root cause of things. And I was just propelled into all things personal development, yoga, meditation, cleansing, fasting, languaging, neuro-linguistic programming, mindset, health, all of it. I just kind of dove all in because I just was so unhappy with the way things weren't going that I was like, okay, I'm all in making life changes. And so I was going through so much change that I was passionate about studying these things myself to help other people through what I was going through, because there wasn't as much support 20 something years ago when I was going through it. And now I'm so grateful that I went through that. I can say that now. And I just acquired all of these tools to help other people through their life shifts.
Yeah, well, thank you for the work that you do. And we've got some cool stuff. We're going to cover some of those tactics and strategies in our conversation. But I wanted to mention you have a free gift for our listeners, an inner child healing that we're going to link to in the show notes. So wherever you guys are listening to this episode, you can go there and click that link and get a free gift from Anahata Ananda on inner child healing. And we'll link to some other fun stuff like your shamangelic breath work, and all of these things can be found at shamangelichealing.com, which is SHAMANGELICHEALING.com. Anything that you want to share on that little early note?
Well, I think it's time for us, in this last year has been intense for many of us, and the shadow is rising, whether it's in humanity, our shadow, the parts of us that are the not so radiant, beautiful parts of us that are seeking to be looked at so that they can be evolved. And doing the inner child work, I think, is really important. Doing the shadow work where you're looking at darkness, pain, anger, resentment, distortions, things that are in your energy field that are really not true, maybe outdated, or trauma that hasn't really been healed and integrated. The lessons from those experiences maybe got bypassed because, maybe when those experiences, whether it was a heartbreak a week ago or whether it was, challenges as a youth or trauma as a child, that, when those are not resolved, they're going to be affecting our health. They're going to be affecting our finances. They're going to be affecting our love life. They're going to be affecting, our emotional body and whether we're happy in life. And so that's why I wanted to give a free gift, because we're going to go deep today. I'm excited to go deep. That's one of the things that I really like to do is, hey, let's go talk at the shadow. Let's go look at the shadow. That's the shamanic way, is let's shine a light on the darkness. Mm-hmm. So I thought I would include that free gift of a guided visualization to kind of heal the inner child wounds.
Beautiful. And, well, guys, that's going to be linked to in the show notes. And Anahata, I would like to talk a little bit about shadow work and fill in our listeners who may not be familiar. What is shadow work?
It's looking at our bullshit, frankly. It's looking at our pain. It's looking at where there's a distortion somewhere. Maybe, we were raised believing we weren't good enough, or that we weren't lovable, or that we weren't worthy of love. And so the shadow work is going to look at that lie, that belief that really isn't in alignment with the truth. So shadow work might also be looking at, where am I accountable for things in my life that I've been blaming other people for? Mm-hmm. So that's going to go looking at where there's patterns that keep repeating, that keep creating an undesirable outcome, like a health problem, like financial problems or heartbreak. The shadow work is, hey, let's go look at the real root cause instead of run, hide, sedate, blame, distract or ignore. Tend to be the things that we go to when we're not doing our personal development work or looking at the shadow. Where is there a core wound in me that hasn't healed? Where are there walls up? Where is there a lie or a limitation or a false belief that is running my life? Mm-hmm. So the shadow work is really, let's go take a look at it. Let's go take a look at what's unresolved, what's not aligned, what's false. Because, most of the time we've been having those experiences, we weren't in a position to do the healing work or to do the realignment work after a trauma, after a breakup, where we don't know how to interpret those signals because that's not how we were raised. And so shadow work is like, okay, let's go take a look at those things we've been, shoving under the carpet because we weren't ready to look at it. We didn't have the tools or didn't have the support system. Mm-hmm. And those things, without looking at that is sabotaging your current day, your current life situations and potentially your future as well.
Mm-hmm. A few of the challenges that I've seen come up when it comes to shadow work or, evolution, personal growth, whatever vernacular you prefer, are sometimes it's difficult to ascertain what are our traumas and what really had a big impact on us, especially if something, if we've blocked it out or, suppressed it, if that's kind of, shoving the energy down, dusting it under the rug is our approach. How do you start shining a light on what has been impactful for you?
I appreciate that question. And I think for everybody, follow the emotional trail. When there's anger, resentment, rage, like when there's sadness, grief, follow the trail. Now, most of the times when emotions rise, the tendency is to distract or ignore or sedate, or oppress. Don't feel, don't cry, don't talk about it, especially men. Especially men have been taught to oppress emotions. Men taught to oppress more the watery emotions, like tears, and women are taught to oppress
when we're afraid we're going to sweat through our eyes.
right, yeah, right. And like as if there's something wrong with that. And the thing is that if you follow the tear trail, there's usually something that needs healing. Whether that's abandonment or there was a loss or there was a heartbreak or a rejection. Usually if you follow the tear trail, there's a wound that needs attention. And we don't want to ignore those tears. We want to actually go in. And that's where the inner child comes in that says, wow, my little boy or my little girl just felt rejected. And it's like, well, it's okay to feel that. And so first of all, we're going to follow the trail, and we're going to give permission to feel where perhaps we might have been told, don't feel, don't yell, don't cry, don't get angry. We're actually going to give permission to the emotions to express in a healthy way, in a healthy way. And then in that process, we want to inquire, hey, why are you feeling this? What does it remind you of? So that if this pattern, if there's a pattern of rage, if there's a pattern of sadness, and we start following it back, follow the trail back, we say, oh, this is reminding me of the time that my dad left when I was 3. Or this is the time that this, my brother betrayed me, and he embarrassed me in front of my friends, or whatever it was. Or this person lied to me. This person I was dating, cheated on me. Or we go back to the initial root cause, and we start to look at the patterns, because when a pattern is not healed, when an injury or like a wound or a trauma is not healed, that vibration is still in our energetic field, and it will keep attracting situations like it until we look at and get louder each time, until we look at the root cause and say, oh, I am worthy. I didn't, the fact that I was adopted, or the fact that, this person wasn't able to parent me, or I was rejected in some way, let's just say as a child, that says, even though they didn't value me, that might have been the program that then is, I'm unworthy. It's a pattern that keeps repeating in life. Everywhere you go, I'm unworthy. I'm not lovable. Then we go back to that original one. Oh, just because my parents didn't think I was worthy or valuable and they gave me up for adoption does not mean that I'm unworthy. So we start to look at the original imprint there. So I like to follow the emotions back and start asking, what's underneath it? What does this remind you? When was this the first time you remember this happening? So that we can go back and heal the original wounds. And then we also get to go back at 7 when it repeated, at 9 when it repeated, 12, 13, 15, the whole year of 17, 25 to 28. So we get to start to go back and visit that version of us at age 6, again, at age 13, and reparent them, bring them the love, the support, the worth, the encouragement, the advice perhaps that they didn't get at those ages. So we're really reparenting those parts of us that are wounded.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've seen come up a number of times is when someone starts giving themselves permission to cry, and to let that energy move. Sometimes it's weeks or months that there's a lot of crying, almost like playing catch up.
Yeah. Well, if it took 4 decades, 3, 4, 5, 6 decades that's been oppressed, there might be some catch up. And this is where we really get to move more into the feminine energy of just nurturing and patience and compassion, not judging. Hey, you should be over this by now. You're like, I'm dealing with 4 decades of grief, and it's going to take me a minute. And I'm starting to feel and honor my emotions again. That's going to take a minute. I've been oppressing it for decades. So not only may it come up a lot, but our tendency to judge it and oppress it, we're also going to be facing that again and again and again, where the inner critic might be bullying ourselves to say, hey, you should be going through this faster, stop whining about it. And, I had just a client last week that is really deeply grieving the loss of her son. I mean, this is her son, and it was a suicide. And, it's been over a year, and everybody's telling her, get over it and move on. And it's just like, she is still going through the grieving process, and rushing it, forcing it, judging it, doesn't help the process move. And so we're also going to be looking at all of our beliefs around emotional expression, anger, sadness, and we're going to have to be facing those at the same time and dismantling them, allowing a new program that respects emotional intelligence, that respects that if I'm angry, I know if I'm angry, if I'm pissed, like something's not right. Mm-hmm. And like something's not right. Maybe in my business, I'm getting frustrated about a thing. That's probably because there's something that needs to be fixed or needs to be changed or needs to be looked at, and I haven't been dealing with it, or something in the environment has changed so that thing doesn't work anymore, and I haven't had the time, or I didn't look at the clues, whether it's in a relationship, your business, your finances, your health. We're getting clues all the time that things need to be addressed. And maybe in relations, it's like, oh, I keep, even with this person that I absolutely adore, we keep having fights. And that frustration around those fights might be, oh, we might need to upgrade our communication. I might need to do more of my personal development work. I might need to learn how to give them space or break codependent patterns. So frustration, anger, rage, sadness, like they're intelligent. They rise for a reason. And if we can be more respectful of doing the work when those emotions rise and say, what are you showing me, instead of just reach for alcohol or reach for sex or reach for Netflix, of like, what is this about? Is to get into the practice of self-inquiry.
Yeah. And bringing that observer to our day-to-day life so we can recognize when these emotions come up and then ask the important questions like, where's this coming from?
Yes.
If it's anger and rage because, some guy like accidentally cut you off on the road, and the first time that you can really think of being rageful was when you were raped as a child, okay, maybe there's some work there, but you're saying recognize and observe these emotions and then ask, where's this coming from, so that we can kind of trace it back and start that journey.
Right. And if there was, sometimes, many of us might have a couple like big traumas, bigger imprints. And sometimes for many of us, it's just little stuff over time that's stacked and stacked and stacked. I'm not good enough, or I have to be perfect, or there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with my body, that I'm not able to attract the right person. There's something wrong with my gender. There's something wrong with my sexuality. There's something wrong with the things that I like aren't the things that I'm supposed to like. And so those kinds of things, people think, oh, well, I didn't have a trauma as a kid. And it might just be this little distortions of programming that are unrealistic, that don't allow you to be authentic, that you might be needing to look at to refine. So I've had a lot of people judge even their past. Well, nothing bad really happened. But the thing is that doesn't mean there's clean energy and clean beliefs in there. It can be subtle. And absolutely, when we're starting to, I love that you said, bring the witness. When we start bringing forward the witness, where we start watching our behavior from like outside of ourselves. This is actually opening in the Hindu tradition. We would say we're opening the third eye, because we're not just seeing it through our own experience and through our human eyes. We're actually rising above and awakening our third eye to see the bigger picture. Oh, there's a pattern here. Oh, I'm actually part of the problem. Oh, this addiction has to do with this trauma that I'm numbing, that I'm not dealing with, or the pain of this breakup or this divorce that I'm not dealing with, that is a correlation to the addiction to alcohol or pot or whatever it is. There's a correlation here. Oh, I keep attracting the wrong kind of person because I don't think I'm good enough. Or I'm not speaking my truth. I'm not saying no, so everybody else is running my life. And it might be an issue about speaking your truth or having enough self-respect instead of outsourcing that, expecting a boss or a friend or a colleague or a partner is going to respect you without respecting yourself. And so the witness consciousness is really essential to personal development so that we can step back and take a look.
Yeah. And just before we talk a little bit more on radical honesty and, coming from that frequency of truth, that story you told with the mother and her son who had committed suicide, what perspective do you have and perhaps share in situations like that on the connection between the spiritual dimension and the physical dimension? Some people would say they believe that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, that we have soul contracts that we have made with certain individuals before we come here. Other people will say this is all God's plan, and I trust in God's plan. What is the perspective that you might offer someone going through a trauma like that mother experienced?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's really important with whatever trauma, with whatever pain you're looking at, is gentleness and compassion, like to just be kind with yourself so that we're not adding to the trauma by the inner bully saying it's your fault or you should have done better, or, that is making it worse by not being kind to ourselves when we're navigating a sticky, tender, traumatic experience, whatever that is to first come with gentleness and compassion. And this is where it's important to delineate between self and another soul. That a lot of times when we're dealing with a death, or we're dealing with a breakup, or we're dealing with a villain victim situation, a trauma of some kind, is we want to separate that these are two separate souls with their own journey and their own path. Because as a mother, and I'm a mother, I can feel that I have to control the direction of my kids, that I'm responsible and for their choices. And the thing is that I'm not in a position to make choices for somebody else. I can't make a choice when they're little, of course, but when they are growing and becoming more young adults or adults, like this is an acknowledging that this person has their own will, they're their own soul with their own path, their own struggles, their own challenges, and their own classroom, their own destiny, and their own karma in this lifetime. And so, part of that is to just give a little bit space and to understand at a bigger picture. Of course, we're going to want to have a different perspective and elevate above the situation that says, his addiction or his depression or whatever he was going through is about him. Now, as a mother, we can look at, did I have any part of that? Did I make it worse? Did I contribute that in any way? So this is doing the inner work. Did I have anything to do with that? That's radical honesty. That's a big, tough question to ask.
It's responsibility.
Did I have any accountability? Absolutely, responsibility. Did I have any part? And hey, if I was a drunk when my son was little, then, yes, I can look at my accountability. I can look at any part that I contributed to that. And that's where I'm going to need to come to my own radical forgiveness. I'm going to need to look at my own humanness and forgive myself if I contributed in any way. And that may be 3%, it may be 0%, it might be 40%. Either way, we want to look at our part, if there is any part, we want to look at it. And back to honesty, because it's not 100%. It's definitely not 100% because I don't have will over somebody else's life. I might want to, And this is where codependency comes in, where we're reaching into somebody else's life, trying to get them to not be depressed or trying to get them to sober up. And whether they want to or not, tough radical accountability is not within our control.
Mm-hmm.
And I have, one of my relatives has been dancing with addiction for 4 decades.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, did I come with force, judgment, control, guilt, shame, love, trying to get him to sober up and wake up. And that when the truth, when it comes down to it, is that judgment isn't making it any better.
Mm-hmm.
And radical accountability, my judgment is making it worse. How can I pull back, not my love, but pull back my control, my judgment, my opinion, and just be in the loving space of how can I support you? How can I love you?
Mm-hmm.
Without the condition of you have to be sober, you have to stay alive, all the way to the point that you can't take your life, like, because people can.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is, we all have will, and we can direct that in any way that we wish. Now, our loved ones might not like that. They might not like our choices, and this is where we get to deal with our own judgment about other people's choices, like to sedate, to take your own life, to be addicted to a substance. And now we want to look at the bigger picture as to what was going on underneath that. And we may not ever know with a son that took his own life, all of the things that contributed to that.
Mm-hmm.
But we can know that what am I here to learn from this?
Mm-hmm.
What am I here to heal? What am I here to forgive? And then what I would always do is reestablish a relationship with the soul that's on the other side. So if it's a father that passed, if it is a partner that passed, if it is a child that passed, I will always in a session reconnect them to that soul so that we can do some clearing, forgiveness work, communicate. Hey, here's what I wanted them to know before they left. Here's what I want them to know now. Here's what this soul wants the mother to know. So I'll do a lot of interdimensional work to reestablish a current relationship so that there isn't a loss and we can receive perspective from the soul that's on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really beautiful to see the healing work that happens when you're in a session with somebody that has passed or somebody that has been, maybe they're estranged for whatever reason, and they haven't yet passed. We can do a lot of healing work interdimensionally to bring about clearing between both parties. And it's a lot of heart work. It's a lot of compassion. It's a lot of forgiveness. There's a lot of tears. And there's a lot of release to be like, okay, I am not responsible for the parts that I'm not responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to carry the burden that isn't mine. And I can forgive the part that is mine. Even if it's 2% or 52% in any situation, I want to look at the part that is mine. And what is the lesson here that I'm learning?
Mm-hmm. I also feel that radical honesty is part and parcel with recognizing that everyone that's in our life that we love is going to pass, and us too. And that is the frequency of truth. It's an inevitability on a long enough timeline. And some of the regret that we may experience is that we weren't as present as we could have been. We didn't feel that truth. We didn't let the person know. We didn't spend more quality time with them, or whatever, your love languages are and what theirs are. You know what I mean? And so I think that kind of ties back into what you mentioned of being willing, having the courage to look at the shadow and look at some of the hard truths of life so that they could shape the way that we are living.
Absolutely. That's the lesson of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
What am I learning from this? What would I do differently?
Mm-hmm.
I would spend more quality time. I would apologize. I would let them know that I care about them. I would show up. And so those are the lessons that when you do the inner work, when you really excavate, and it takes tremendous amount of courage, and this is why I walk people through the process, whether it's a private session or, a virtual experience or a whole retreat or whatever it is to walk people through that. Let's go down there. Let's hold your hand through the process. Let's go take a look at the pain, the anger, and what is yours and what is theirs. So we can kind of separate that out, and what doesn't really belong to you that you need to give back to them that you've been holding and feeling responsible for. So there's going to be that clarity. And as you said, that every person in our life will pass, if we also look at every person in our life as a teacher, and that every situation is a classroom, then that's going to be the perspective of, what is this teaching me? And that, and we've got to go deep to look at that, because in order to see clearly, what is it teaching me? I've got to get my emotion. I've got to swim through my emotional waves first, because I won't be able to get to that clarity about what's really true when I'm like navigating the tsunamis of grief or the tsunamis of rage. Like that's got to move, so that then we can get to, all right, what is this really about? And we're going to be looking at, what is this person teaching me? Whether it is the person that whether it is my abuser, whether it is my parent, whether it's my child, whether it's my ex, whether it's the person they had the affair with, like, what am I here to learn? What is this teaching me? And that's really the positive, the real benefit of doing the inner work and doing the inner child healing work is, when we excavate it, it's like, okay, now I have this pearl. Now that I've gone through the deep oceans in the abyss, now I have this treasure of trust my intuition, or honor other people's journey, or be a better listener, or it's important for me to speak my truth. If I feel a no, say no. If I feel a yes, say yes. And so all of those pearls are going to be what really helps us navigate and benefit our journey going forward. Because when we take the lesson and we implement it, now we've got gold in the present moment. Because now we are seizing the day. Now we are making every relationship count. Now we are listening to the body's cues around where it needs, to be healthier. And we're trusting our intuition in business or in relationships much more, which helps avoid unnecessary conflict. And we break the pattern. That's what's really exciting, is we break the pattern.
Absolutely. Guys, if you're getting value from this conversation, please share this episode with one or two people that would also get value and appreciate it. And just ask them to give it 15, 20 minutes. So thank you. Let's continue. I'd like to talk a little bit about the feminine and masculine balance, because one of the things that I've been observing recently, I've seen so many examples of, and I don't mean this to come across judgy, weak men, and men not leading women, acting like it's okay to watch copious amounts of pornography in their relationships, and like women should tolerate that. If you look at the reality that many women are experiencing, where they're thrown in cubicles and put on hormones and given hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, it's like hell, and I think part of the starting place or part of the reason that so many women are expressing frustration is because the men are not stepping up right now. And I would have to imagine that some of this has to do with rebalancing the masculine and feminine and like restoring order. Maybe you could speak on that a little bit, and I'll let you run with it.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing this up. This is definitely up right now. And this is not just related to gender. This is about balancing the feminine and masculine within, so that we are coming with more wholeness. Let's visit the feminine for a little bit. On the feminine, in men and women, the left side of our body, the right side of our brain is more sensitive in a good way, because the feminine intuition for men and women is what helps us sense if something is a yes or a no. Do we pause? Do we go? Is it mine? Is it not? Is it true? Is it false? And so we actually want, as men and women, to honor our sensitivity, including our emotions, because our emotions, all of those, and our intuition, they're going to help guide us. It's our GPS system. And as for men or women, when we oppress that, then we're going to be looking outside ourselves for direction. and we tend to be weak. Men and women, we tend to be more sheep. Well, I don't know what to do. I don't have my own internal GPS. I don't know who I am. So then we see in men and women so much, how am I supposed to look? What am I supposed to do? What does success look like? What is my body supposed to look like? And so that's a part of our feminine that we're bringing back on board, is listening to our own truth, our own sensitivity, our own emotions. And so on the feminine side, we have sensitivity, we have patience, we have intuition, we have flexibility, we have nurturing, self-care, and a spiritual faith, some spiritual connection outside of ourselves. We're willing to receive divine guidance instead of the ego trying to do it all ourselves. On the feminine side, in men and women, is receptive to allow in guidance, healing, insight, perspective. And so these are all things that are more on the feminine side. Creativity as well. And as we navigate creating the new paradigm here, on Earth, then we're going to need that intuition and the creativity that thinks outside of the box. That's the right side of the brain, which is more feminine. Let's look at the big picture. Let's look at the long game. Let's look at the impact on 7 generations out. Let's look at the impact environmentally. And right now, most of our commerce does not have a feminine component. It's just a profit component, which is not taking care of humanity, and it's not taking care of the planet. So we can see that we're running our businesses from a more out of balance masculine. Mm-hmm. So I want to just make a little quadrant here, that there is, on the feminine side, there's unhealthy feminine and healthy feminine, conscious feminine. And on the masculine side, there's unhealthy masculine, greed, bullying, competition, force, anger, war, these kinds of things. And then there's also the healthy masculine. So when we look at the healthy masculine, which is more the right side of the body in men and women, left side of the brain, more analytical, the healthy masculine looks like courage, integrity, honesty, also resilience, ethics, doing the right thing, being discerning. And he's also about teamwork. Let's rise together instead of I win, you lose, which is more the unhealthy masculine. The win-win is more what the healthy masculine. How can we work together? How can we create a product that serves humanity that also honors the environment? And also is ethically sourced and ethically created. So we're shifting this business model. And so what's happening inside of us is where there's out of balance, like too much masculine, not enough feminine, or too much feminine. Like the unhealthy feminine would be the drama queen, would be insecure. She would be wishy-washy, indecisive. She would be cold. What's that?
Bridezilla,
yes. Dragon lady, ice queen, all of these things, gossipy, this kind of thing. And so we're looking at the unhealthy masculine, which is, in men and women, leading our country. The unhealthy feminine is, what we're seeing on, reality TV, drama, manipulation, these kinds of things. And what we're doing, what is happening in the shadow, we're seeing the unhealthy feminine and masculine and how it's hurting us. Hate, rage, those kinds of things way down here. Shame, guilt, abuse, bullying, sex trafficking, all of this, sexual misconduct in Hollywood and lots of places. And so we're what has happened in this last year is we're seeing our shadow in the unhealthy feminine and unhealthy masculine rise. So in each of us individually, we get to look at, wow, this is what I was raised with. This is what was most likely reinforced by society. That when you bully someone, guess what? You get the job, you get the lunch money, you win the trophy. And so we're actually looking at where some of these patterns have been reinforced by society. So this is where we get to do the shadow work, each of us individually, and saying, wow, where do I have any unhealthy feminine or unhealthy masculine aspects? And you know what? I have a course on that. So we'll give your whole crew a discount on that course too.
What's it called so people can find it too?
Balancing the feminine and masculine within.
Okay, balancing the masculine and feminine within on shamangelichealing.com.
Yeah. You'll find that under online courses, because this is so valuable for all of us to have. This is where we can come back to more integrative wholeness, where we can say, what is my part? Because we can say, oh, those people in the White House, or those people in Hollywood, or those people that do that. You're like, well, where am I participating? Where am I bullying? Maybe it's to myself. Maybe it's the inner critic. Where am I not being ethical? Where am I not creating a win-win? Where am I being cold? Where have I not come to forgiveness? Where am I not listening to my intuition? Where am I not being ethical? These are all questions so that we can evolve those lower frequencies in our feminine and masculine and rise them to more the healthy feminine and healthy masculine qualities, so that we're not looking for our partner or our job or our neighbor or our parents to bring wholeness. We're doing that ourselves. And then if I'm in that respectful space as a woman, I'm not going to tolerate a relationship that disrespects me. If my healthy masculine is intact and my healthy feminine is intact, I'm not going to lead without ethics. I'm not going to say yes to things that aren't in alignment. So we got to do our inner work to start changing the way we relate to each other and how we create, and our planet and commerce. So this is happening. This is happening. And we're kind of being invited strongly to do this kind of work. So I want to ask you, Anthony, what is something that you think might be unhealthy feminine or unhealthy masculine that you were raised with?
A big one was not allowing myself to cry.
Yes.
I never saw my dad cry. When I was in my 20s, asked my mom if she'd ever seen him cry. And she said once when you were born. And the only time I even maybe saw a tear leave his eye was when his dad died. And that wasn't because he was sad he lost his father. It was because that marked the end of any opportunity for him to establish a relationship with his father that he never had.
You know what? I want to acknowledge you just mentioned two different forms of tears, because when you were born, your dad had happy tears. And why would we ever want to oppress anyone, man or woman's happy tears? Those are tears of joy, tears of truth. And why would we want to oppress anyone's tears of grief, that they're sad that this chapter is closing and I'm not ever going to have this relationship with my dad that I wanted? Like, it's natural to have grief and it's natural to be joyful, and tears are beautiful. So what is something that you're doing to evolve that pattern? Because it was in there for a long time.
I don't find myself crying much, to be honest. And it's, I've given myself permission to cry more, but I don't often feel that urge.
Yeah.
My brother's taught me a lot, because he was one of the people that I was thinking of when I mentioned that phase of finally allowing yourself to cry. Yeah. And he went through a few months where he was crying a lot, like we're talking multiple times a day. And then it kind of leveled out, you know what I mean? And he's like, he doesn't feel the same, desires to express himself. You know, he's kind of purged. He's allowed that energy to flow where maybe it hadn't. I haven't gone through that myself. One of the things that's been a little bit curious to me that I wanted to ask you about, and I know I want to be respectful of your time and kind of land this plane, maybe talk about shamanic breathwork after this, shamangelic breathwork, I should say, is sex and relationships. because there's so much Catholic guilt around sex and what it should be. And then when you explore the Bible, there's a lot of talk of people with multiple wives, and it's not necessarily what we've heard from the church. But then when I also look at sexual relationships, it does seem like it's it can be much more difficult for women emotionally to make that physical connection and, casually date than say men. And as someone that's trying to be conscious about the emotional impact that I have on everyone, I'm curious, what is your perspective on sex, and what is best for humanity and like our collective approach to that part of our lives?
Thank you for asking. It's a great question. And I did a podcast on this with Kylie about, just looking at sexual distortions and sexuality. And I do a whole course for women specifically on womb healing and awakening the sacred feminine and honoring sacred sexuality. And this is not something we were taught, Anthony. We were not taught sacred sexuality. Like you mentioned with the, like religious guilt and shame is some of the lowest possible frequencies that we can feel. And our sexual urges, we have natural sexual urges, and a lot of those are also distorted with guilt, shame, or, hey, you need to be sexual before you're ready just to get approval or to not be judged or to get that person to like you or to be a man. You have to conquer a woman. You have to get that. And so we've got to go back to how we were programmed, how we were trained. And, this goes back to the very beginning of when I was a little girl or a little boy. How was the opposite sex spoken about? Because that right at the very beginning, before we even go through puberty or we start going through our sexuality, we start looking at how mom treated dad, how dad treated mom, how men treated women, how women are treated. And our programming around value and worth sexually starts way early. And there's so much distortion, and there's so much not true. And there's a lot in the media that portrays men as this and women as that. So we're also starting to see this is what sex is in a movie or in pornography or in a magazine or in on a Budweiser ad, or a car ad. We're starting to see men and women, their value and their worth sexually way early on. So we've got to acknowledge that before we even get into the bedroom, whatever age that is, even like when we're first starting to become sexual, there is so much distorted programming that dishonors the sacredness of the sexual, of sacred sexual expression. Mm-hmm. It's a trophy. It is how to release emotion or to get something rather than to have it be a deep, beautiful connection between two people that are communicating, that are honoring and respecting each other, mm-hmm. and can communicate about the kind of intimacy that they're ready for without pressure, without force, but with communication that usually is well beyond our maturity level at 13 or at 15 or at 17. And especially if we've been trained and educated by people that also have a completely messed up, distorted version of sexuality. So I'm going to ask you, what is something that you heard as a boy growing up before you were sexually active? What is something that you heard that affected your view of women?
One of the early times that I remember being very nervous around sexuality, I was like a late bloomer, and I was more advanced in sports than I was in relationships. And I don't mean, I was more experienced in sports than I was in relationships. So I remember playing varsity soccer, and as a sophomore, every time we won, it would be story time on the bus ride home, and guys would tell stories of themselves hooking up with women. And I was terrified because I'd never done anything but like kiss a girl. and I had no stories, right? And I knew at some point, if we won enough games, it was going to be my turn. And so then, I mean, for months, I was like, man, I got to get some stories. Why am I like the only one on the bus? At least that's what I thought. You know, why am I the only one on the bus without any of these stories? Like, you got to get some stories, man. And I have wondered how much that emotional imprint has stayed with me, you
Right?
know?
It's powerful. And I want to acknowledge that you weren't a late bloomer at all. The judgment that it has to be by when you're sophomore or a junior, like where you're 16, 15, 16, 17, that's the perception of the collective. And rather than honoring what felt natural and your natural curiosity towards women, or your natural, like, hey, look, I'm into sports right now. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not interested in chicks right now. I really like soccer. This is my jam. I'm not interested right now. Does not mean that there was anything wrong with you. Can you hear that judgment? That I was a late bloomer. It's like, no, you're just blooming at your own time in your own way. And I guarantee a lot of women feel that pressure as well. Oh, are you a virgin still? Are you a virgin still? Like, oh, you haven't given it up yet? Oh, and so, but a woman, same thing. I don't like wanting to, rather than there being a judgment about timeline, what if there wasn't a judgment about timeline and you were naturally able to explore your sexual curiosity, whether you were 16 or 22 or 28? Do you see how there's that social pressure? And there's a lot of social pressure for women as well. Especially if you like somebody. Oh, well, then there's the social pressure, whether you're ready or not, to give them what they want. And you can hear that a lot of men are wanting to get the story, which has nothing to do with how they feel about the woman, or at that point, young woman. You see, like, there's very little respect going on both sides.
Right.
So early.
For sure. And so imagine you're speaking to the dating male collective, right? You've mentioned this new paradigm that we're kind of moving into. And for the men that are ready to move into that new paradigm, how do you feel is a good and healthy way for them to approach dating and sacred sexuality that would be best for the collective?
Start talking. Like, scratch all the expectations of dates on, sex on a third date, or like, just scratch it all and just be vulnerable and be honest and be present, so that you actually get to know this other person, not with this prize in the background of, I'm just getting to know you to bed you. Just actually really getting to know, who is this person at a soul level? What is their past? What are their passions? What are their fears? Where are those wounds? And guaranteed, so many of us have sexual wounds, and just sections. I just call those, what you just explained is quite typical. And most of us have, and women too, sexual distortions, unrealistic expectations, guilt, shame, maybe a woman, like, because she really liked somebody, said yes or didn't say no, and then got pregnant. And so then there's the additional guilt of, having sex maybe before she was ready, or an unwanted pregnancy, or an STD. Like, there's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of distortion in everybody's sexual energy field. And what if we actually just started talking about that, so that we could navigate sexuality with more awareness, more tenderness, and being aware of maybe the traumas or the distortions that we're both still trying to unravel. It's where we can talk about, gosh, I really want to have sex right now, and I'm trying to withhold, and just talk about that. I really have sexual desire, but, I know that we're not emotionally ready yet. We don't know each other yet to be able to have this be sacred intimacy versus just sex. And so I think for everybody, dating is to just be a lot more vulnerable, a lot more authentic, and it's going to be new and uncomfortable. Well, what's a lot more uncomfortable is to have sexual relations in which we think we're connecting, and then afterwards we just neither feels great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's
And
almost like it can smother that emotional connection if you're too quick with the physical.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
Or as I work with a lot of couples, their relationship is based on the shallow end of sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're going to reach a ceiling with how deep their relationship is because it's based on this shallow sexuality. They don't actually know each other very well. They're going through the motions. They're hiding a lot. Both are not really speaking about what they like and don't want in the bedroom. There's not great communication about each other respecting outside of the bedroom. And so they're reaching a ceiling, even though they might be married with 2 kids, or it's a great soul connection relationship, but it keeps reaching a ceiling and they're stuck. It's stagnant because that depth was never established at the very beginning. And now they're well into their habits. Mm-hmm. Or a great relationship goes in the shallow end and ends because they don't have the communication tools to navigate the uncomfortable times and have just been using sex to after an argument, they've just been like, well, let's just have sex rather than let's deal with the issues. Mm-hmm. They're using sex as a bypass rather than saying, you know what, I don't feel respected here, or I really don't want this. I want this, but I was just afraid you're going to leave me if I tell you that. So I think that dating, it's time for a lot more radical honesty and vulnerability and tenderness and releasing all of the other expectations that we learned in our youth about what a relationship is supposed to look like and just allow it to unfold naturally.
Oh, sorry. The internet cut out on us right as you were saying, let's deal with the issues rather than using sex.
Yes. Let's deal with the issues rather than using sex as a bypass to getting like dating in the first place, instead of using sex as a bypass to actually getting to know each other, getting to trust each other, getting to really understand each other, and not using sex as a bypass. And also later in the relationship, not using sex as a bypass to when there's an argument or disconnection, rather than dealing with the actual issue that says, hey, maybe we're not communicating, or maybe we're not, we want different things and we don't want to be honest about it. And so let's just have sex. And so that's where it's going to create conflict.
Guys, if anything Anahata Ananda has helped you, please share this episode with someone else who would enjoy it and ask them to give it a few minutes. Last question to kind of bring it home before you share the best way for people to stay up to date with your work beyond just going to shamangelichealing.com and checking out the free gift on the inner child healing that we're going to share in the show notes. Many of our listeners are familiar with like Wim Hof breath work, yeah. Right? Maybe you could kind of tell us a little bit about shamangelic breath work and some of the key differentiators.
Well, one of the things that I do with shamangelic, it's a journey. It's not like a daily breath work like a Wim Hof, where you might, do a daily breath work to detox the body, to clear the mind, to open consciousness. There's also all kinds of different pranayamas, which are like, the East Indian tradition of different breathwork practices to balance the left and right hemispheres of the brain, to calm the nervous system. So there's lots of meditation breathing practices. This is specifically a breathwork journey that's, quite a while, like a full ceremony with the introduction and everything, and the journey and the integration is like 2 hours. This is breath that goes down. It's directed down into the basement like a broom to go into where there's things hiding in the basement, to bring forward that like deep inhales and exhales that are really hyper oxygenating the body, then start accessing the subconscious brain. And that's where the traumas, that's where the memories are that we want to bring forward so that we can integrate, we can face them, that we can bring awareness to what's there. So the shamangelic breath work that I facilitate is a deep journey inward. It's quite emotional. It can be very cathartic. It can be very liberating. It can be heart opening. It can be healing inner child wounds. It can be absolutely ecstatic in the clarity of vision of soul purpose or connection to higher power or divine. So every journey is different. And we do have virtual breathwork experiences. So we'll put the link in the show notes as well. If people want to come and they can't get here in Sedona and do an individual or like a group breathwork with me, then they can join on the virtual option. But really, what I think is different is how to go deep with each person, tailored to what they need to hear or what they need to release or what they need to open to bring greater alignment or greater attunement. So it's very much in the personal journeys, very tailored to each person's individual situation of where we might clear out density and bring in more light. So it's a profound journey. It's one of my favorite tools, and I've been doing that for 20 years. I've led over 8,000 people through the process, and it's one of my most favorite for core healing, spiritual awakening, and heart expansion.
Lovely. And can people you have one coming up March 12th, and then people that want to stay up to date on future ones, shamangelichealing.com.
Yeah, under the calendar on shamangelichealing.com, under the calendar, we'll always have our next, because we're going to try to do those every month or so, or every 6 weeks. And so I highly recommend doing a virtual journey. If you can get here in Sedona, that's the most powerful, is doing that in person. We have groups. I have a group of, a group retreat coming tomorrow with 12 women, another men's group with 8 people next week. And so people come and say, hey, we want to bring a bunch of us together, or just yourself or with a partner or a friend. And so those journeys are powerful, and all of that you can, let me know if you're coming to Sedona and book in. And Ben Greenfield came and did a breath work with me just a couple months ago, and so there's a podcast. My podcast is Shamangelic Healing podcast.
Oh, nice.
Which we got to have you on, Anthony. I would love to pick your brain about all of your magical wisdom. But anyway, the episode 53 explains, Ben goes through his breathwork journey and explains a little bit more about it. So people might like that. I've been doing that breathwork with Aubrey Marcus and all of his crew for like 7 years now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
So,
that's great. Well, Anahata, Ananda, this has been a lovely conversation. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and time. And guys, go to shamangelichealing.com, SHAMANGELIC healing.com. Grab the free inner child healing gift that we're going to link to in the show notes. Anahata, anything else you'd like to share with the people as we kind of wrap up?
If you're still here, then it's time. If you're still listening, I want to acknowledge that you are ready for awakening, or you're ready to accelerate your awakening. And so I want to acknowledge, those people that are still listening for their commitment to their own personal development. And it's no accident that you're here having this conversation, listening to this conversation. And so whether it's with me or somebody else, if you are ready to accelerate, then absolutely say yes. Trust your intuition and find the right workshop, healing, ceremony, sessions that will help you take your life to the next level and clear out the density and make room for more light. So find me on shamangelichealing.com. I'm also on Instagram, Anahata Ananda, and the podcast, Shamangelic Healing Podcast, and looking forward to having you on the show. And I want to thank you, Anthony, for your dedication. So many episodes. I'm so impressed with how dedicated you are to really bring out conscious content and resources to this community. So thank you, brother, for what you're doing and what you're sharing with the community and what you're doing on a personal level.
Thank you as well. This has been wonderful.
Yeah.